we'll start this one without the bio read, but it's part two with Steve Larmer, and we touched on, we know your coaches a little bit during the last interview. We touched on your time spent in Peterborough growing up. We got through to your time spent with the Chicago Blackhawks, the New York Rangers, the Stanley Cup. A lot of highlights, but there's still a lot more going on with you. When you look back on your career, even after we did that first interview, we talked for an hour about your career, but when you look back again, did you have time to reflect a second time? Is there anything that you think of that really still stands out?
Well, I think I one of the other coaches that I played for was Roger Neilson, who was a historic coach here for the Peterborough Petes and whatnot, and went on and coached in the NHL for many years. And I had the opportunity to play for him when he was an associate coach in Chicago for 2 or 3 years, and just a wonderful person. I mean, he was a great communicator. He gets that nickname Captain Video, but he did all the work before they had video coaches. So he would be in after games, editing all the tape. So the next day when you came into the rink, I mean, basically he had everybody's clips down to about 2 or 3 minutes, right, to show you what he wanted to show you. But he was the one doing all the work for that, so it wasn't like you had to sit through the whole game again. It was, some clips of your shifts and, things that you were doing good and things that you need to improve on and whatnot. But Roger was always a guy, when you went in and spoke with him, he had a way of, like he would say, giving you heck, but you would walk out of the room feeling good about yourself.
What does the jersey over your right shoulder mean to you?
Well, a lot, in the sense that he had a great influence on not just myself, but one of the first times I ever met him, I was 14 years old, and he had organized a ball hockey game up in the North End on one of the tennis courts one Saturday afternoon. So a couple of my friends and I went up there and had the opportunity to play ball hockey with him, and he was quite the hacker and whacker.
Once you can't move around so much, then I guess you got to start swinging the lumber out on the ball hockey court.
Yeah. Well, when you're younger and a little quicker, sometimes it can get frustrating. So, but he was quite a competitive guy.
And he coached baseball in town. He did a little bit of everything. He was a teacher, obviously. That's where everything came from for him. But when you do think about it, how crazy is it to think that maybe the origins in video and hockey started in this building that we're sitting in right now?
Well, it really did, in that sense, right? Because, I mean, he was way ahead of his time back then with doing everything, and it wasn't done digitally like it is now on computers. And now you see in the NHL, it's like you come off your shift or whatever, and one of the coaches has got the iPad right there, so you're getting instant feedback, as opposed to back when Roger had to do it, and he had to do it all through VHS tapes and edit it and separate tapes for everybody. And I mean, it was quite the undertaking. And he would be all night at the rink, probably till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, going through all of that stuff, get home and then get back to the rink for 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning to get ready for practice and start meeting with the guys when they came in.
Now with the Petes right now, Noah works for the team full-time as a video coach. I know even former Petes coach Jody Hull, when he was with Hockey Canada U18s, he was their video guy, and he was carrying the video equipment upstairs all by himself. It's evolved to a different point where they're hiring video coaches out of broadcasting colleges instead of former hockey players now.
Well, people that actually know how to run the
machinery,
technology.
Yes,
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and leave it for the coaches to go through it.
What was that like for you in the NHL? I know you had your experience with Roger Neilson, but was it different with everybody else?
No, I think everybody had a good relationship with him. He was not a person that you could get angry with or mad at. I mean, he was just that fair and that honest, and he never lost his temper. He never really got mad, so he was not confrontational at all. So he was just a great guy to talk to.
Now, his legacy on the game, how inspirational do you think that is for people who came up getting to know him?
Well, I think everybody that crossed paths with some, has learned something with regards whether it was to hockey or if it was a life lesson or any of that. So he was just such a positive influence on, not just his players, but the people he worked with, the coaches, the general managers, and everybody that he came in contact with.
Now, you saw Roger Neilson revolutionize the game. You were part of the game while it was really changing in a big way. And what I want to touch on right now is smoking in hockey. And when you retired, there's an article. It's about you're pretty much coming out and saying that you smoked a pack a day during your playing career, and you're advocating like, hey, maybe don't do that now, obviously. But what was that like at the start of your career to the end? How big was that shift?
Well, I think it was a huge shift, obviously. I mean, when I first started playing back in Chicago, there probably was half our team that smoked. So, I mean, basically you would come down in between periods and have a cigarette and relax and get ready to go out for the next period. And then, that towards the later end, the 80s and whatnot, that all kind of changed. And, no smoking in the dressing room, no smoking in, the old Chicago Stadium, and that on a Sunday night game by, halfway through the third period, you couldn't even see the time on the score clock. There was so much smoke in the building from people smoking in there. So now you can't smoke in any public places anywhere, which is great because it's a very unhealthy habit. So I know this, in the Tour de France, they used to smoke a cigarette before the race to warm up their lungs. Was there some sort of old school mentality there, or was it just because you guys wanted to relax? Well, just because we wanted to relax. We didn't have access to that kind of information. It would have justified the whole thing, right? But no, it just, it was a change. And, it was a lot more acceptable back then and a cool thing to do. And, now we know it's not. It's very unhealthy and it's not cool.
And so it went from, in my generation, it was, if you're in a hockey dressing room, you're seeing chewing tobacco as well. And that's even going away to a point where people are becoming aware, like, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. But tobacco in sports, it seems strange because you have finely tuned athletes and then something so unhealthy. But again, that was something that I'm assuming you would have seen a lot of. And did it change at all during your career, or are you seeing it different now with players?
Well, I think I don't know. It's almost a societal thing in a sense, and these athletes are, part and parcel. They're a part of society, so there's always going to be, a percentage of athletes that are going to be doing things that maybe aren't so healthy, but probably the same, or not at the numbers that are in the general public or whatnot, right? So there's stresses to deal with and all kinds of different things, and everyone's different, right? Now,
I think for me I don't know why, but Guy Lafleur, when you think about a player smoking, you always hear about Guy Lafleur.
Yeah.
Now, was he a legend for that? Was that like it's prevalent for me? I don't know how that trickled down to me, but somehow I know that Guy Lafleur smoked in between periods or behind the bench. But were there guys that were, I guess, more outright with it than others?
Well, I don't think anybody hid it back then. I mean, you smoked in the dressing room. You walk into some games or whatnot, and sometimes you'd have to walk by the other team's dressing room in the hallway, and they'd be out there working on their sticks, and Guy would, there'd be a cigarette going on the bench beside him while he was doing his thing and stuff like that. So, I mean, it was more of a generational thing, I think, back then, where a lot of the older players, you grew up different and you reacted to the information that you had, and there were all kinds of players on all kinds of teams that smoked back then. It's
just still baffling to still hear about, I guess.
Yeah.
It is amazing. You talk about generational, and it seemed to have come to an abrupt halt. At the end of your career, how many people would you say versus the start? Just if you could put a percentage on it, I guess.
Well, I think it would, when I first started playing in Chicago in the early 80s, it probably would have been, 10 or 11 guys that smoked regularly. And towards the end, when I was in New York, there probably was maybe 2 or 3 of us, over the course of 13 years. So I think, health and the more knowledge you get with regards to, anything that we put in our bodies, you tend to change it because we all want to live healthy. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's all we really have.
I'll give you another Tour de France anecdote here before we move on a little bit to the evolution of health in sports, but they also kept red wine in their water bottles.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
What was that for?
To make biking less miserable, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, take the pain away.
Yeah.
That's
now,
interesting.
We go to biking or exercising. Another evolution, I'm assuming, that you saw during your career would have been off-season training, in-season training, and you talk about all the knowledge that players were gaining. How did it change for you from, say, junior to 94, 95?
Well, it was night and day. Once again, I mean, there was when Mike Keenan first came into Chicago and whatnot, he had changed the whole dressing room right around. So we come back for training camp that year. It was like our pool table was gone, our ping pong table was gone. There was a weight room installed because we never had any off-ice workout equipment, none at all. So everything was changed. So you walk in the first day and it's like, okay, what's going on here? Well, things are about to be, our world is blowing up in a sense. So we spent a lot of time in the gym, and Mike was really adamant about being in the best possible shape that you could be in to play the type of game that he wanted his teams to play.
Now, was that self-guided at that point, or would there have been a trainer that was helping you?
No, there was he had hired a workout guy on a part-time basis to come in and monitor our workouts, and there'd be like 10 or 11 of us on the bikes for maybe half an hour while the other 10 or 11 were doing circuits, and then we would switch after that and whatnot. And I can remember he was quite upset at us after one of the games that we played, and I think we had a pregame skate because we always practiced the morning of. So we went in, practiced, thought it was going to be a normal, half-hour pregame skate, go out and go through some drills, and everything with Mike was always high tempo. It wasn't like you were just out there in the days before trying to make sure that your skates were good and you had edges and your sticks were all good and take some shots, stuff like that. But it was a full-blown, practice. And then after the practice, it was into the gym and a full-blown workout.
This is before a game?
The day of a game.
Okay.
Not the day before,
Yeah.
the day of, the morning of. So I think we were playing the Quebec Nordiques that night, and I'm not sure if we won or if we didn't, but I think we got outshot in the third period, something like 20-2. It was all we could do to get the puck out of our own end, just dump it out and change.
The goalie have some glares for Keenan after the game?
Yeah, he was real happy. He earned his keep, though, that night.
Yes. Now, when guys that you would have played against, this is going to be Gary Roberts. He is now a consultant for the Seattle Kraken. He was with Vegas before that, Pittsburgh ahead of that as a consultant for how to set up their gyms and how to train properly. When you run into guys like that, who you played against, who are now that involved in that side of the sport, what's that interaction like?
Well, I mean, it's like everything has evolved, right? And I don't think he really, his first X amount of years was like everybody else, I think. And I think he had that really bad neck injury that almost ended his career, and he had to have surgery, and he went through a whole bunch of rehab. And I think that whole process taught him how important, physical fitness is and nutrition. Because he's big into nutrition now too. So I think there are things that happen to you that, make you look at things differently, and then you start to realize how important it is.
Yeah, while I was coming in today, actually, as well, another Toronto Maple Leaf, Shane Corson, was on the radio talking about his time with the PA, or not his time in the NHL, and how he viewed the PA. So he wasn't ever a rep, but he would listen to the guy who was the rep on the team.
Yeah.
And this is a conversation now for players because I guess the NHL is trying to renegotiate the CBA before a season starts or a potential season starts. Your involvement, when did you start picking up with that in your career?
Well, I was about my second or third year. They were looking for, I think Dougie Wilson at the time might have been one of the vice presidents that played on our team. Bob Murray was our player rep, and you always had an assistant player rep. So I was kind of the one that was, they had asked to try and help out and all of that stuff. So I basically was a player rep or an assistant player rep from probably about 1983 or 1984 right through to the, till I retired. And then after that, about 5 years after I retired, I went back and worked for them as a kind of a player liaison guy.
Is it strange to see Murray and Wilson, or when they did transition to the management side of hockey, how important was that understanding for them of how the PA works? And
well, I think they, I think it's funny because you can't have a strong game when one side's weak and the other side dictates. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be balance. And I think all of those guys that have played that are now in management positions understand that. But the one thing that has changed dramatically since the Alan Eagleson days and to now is that the general managers don't have any real say in collective bargaining. Mm-hmm. So they used to be part of the collective bargaining because it was about making hockey teams better and being able to make deals and hang on to players longer and all that kind of stuff. But it's not the way it works today. So most of the guys that are involved in collective bargaining are all the owners now. So it's become more of a business deal than a hockey deal.
Doug Gibson mentioned to us, or talked to us about Alan Eagleson, and he said that he wore hats on both sides and was a little bit of everything, I guess. So the Wild West, I guess, from Alan Eagleson to a more settled approach now?
Well, I think you went from somebody that controlled everything, mm-hmm. right? And I mean, I can remember back, when the transition happened, I think in 1989 or 1990, when it went from Alan Eagleson to Bob Goodnow and all of the conflicts that had come up with regards to Alan, because a lot of us wanted to have player salary disclosure so that we could kind of compare when we were doing our contracts, what a guy that you were similar to making on one team, how you would go about negotiating your contract. So, mm-hmm. and he was against that, but he represented, as a player agent, probably 65% of the players in the National Hockey League. So he had all that information, so he could make it better for his clients, but the rest of us that weren't involved with him were, kind of got the short end of the stick. So we were in a meeting down in Florida, I think it was in Florida one time, and, Mike Lute stood up and said, I make $650,000 and we need salary disclosure. So that's basically how it come about.
Do you take it personally when you watch, or when you hear about negotiations now in the news? Are you still feeling involved?
Well, I pay attention to it closely just because of the ramifications it has on all generations of players. So what's funny is that there were more players making $10 million a year back in the 90s than there are today. Mm-hmm. So you're reading about all of this stuff that's current. The NBA is going to start on
December 22nd, I believe.
Yeah, December 22nd, and you've been reading about all the signings and mm-hmm. in the sports news and whatnot. 4 years at $85 million and all that kind of stuff. Well, back in the late 70s and the early 80s, the NBA was in big trouble, and hockey was way ahead of that from a salary perspective mm-hmm. at that time. So, in effect, it's been, the NHL has probably been stagnant for, 15 or 20 years when it comes to superstars being paid, what they're really worth.
Is that in part due to bad negotiating or just the realities of the economy?
it's a combination
Yeah.
of everything and what you have the stomach for. I mean, it was like when we played, and I know Gary, came in and took over from Larry Ziegler, as Bob Goodenow took over from Alan Eagleson, and the dynamics changed. And Gary came from basketball, who had already implemented a salary cap back then, and that was what his goal was to have happen in hockey. So it has happened.
Now, the haircut the players have to take off the top of their salary based off of the performance of the league and how revenue sharing works at the end of the season. Was there a percentage that was coming off of your salary as well, the same way that it is now for players?
No, we never were involved in a salary cap. So
Yeah.
what we signed for was what we got paid for.
Another thing, like in 2004, 2005, when the league did shut down for a year over that, I know a lot of guys, if you hear them talk about it, they'll say that they can't believe they missed out on making, like, say, an extra $3 million in their career when they had that contract for that season. Where do you stand on that year?
Happened. I mean, that basically is what happened to me. We got locked out in 1994, or 94, 95, because we won the Stanley Cup in 94. We went to training camp the next year after we won the Stanley Cup and went through all of that, and then we got locked out. And our season didn't start again until I think January the 16th or 18th or something like that. So missed out on half a year's salary there. And I had one more year left of my contract after that. And after going through that shortened season, it was like I always say we played, I think we played 44 games in 50 nights, it felt like.
Yeah.
And it just took a toll on, I was older at the time, 35, I think, and it took a toll on my body and my back, and it was, my health is more important, and, I couldn't play that the last year of my contract. So it was gone out the door.
Properly balanced season may have allowed you to complete that?
Well, it would have, definitely, because you would have been properly prepared for it and everything like that. That was the second time we'd gone through, I think, a lockout, and it was, they're not fun.
No, I wouldn't.
And especially, and I get it with the players and that, because your career's so short and all of that stuff too, but, sometimes you need, it's like your kids, you want to leave something better for them.
Yeah,
too,
for the next generation of players.
That's right.
And I guess players are hitting their big contracts now in their early mid-20s. It's not in their 30s.
Well, they're doing it. Their big contracts are now coming out of entry level, which never would have happened before, right? But part of collective bargaining too is that you give up something to get something. So now players are actually getting paid for what they're actually doing, as opposed to being set, like when we played, it was, okay, we'll pay you when you get older, we'll pay you when you get older, and then you get older, and
You're gone.
Like, goodbye.
Yeah.
So, and I'm happy for them for that. I mean, it's good. I think players should be paid what they're worth.
How much did your involvement in the PA impact your negotiations in your final year in Chicago, when you did actually end up leaving the team?
It didn't. I had back then contracts were different, right? So I think I was coming off it was a 3-year contract with an option year. So you tried to get a deal done, prior to the start of the season, going into your option year. So, and I had gone through my option years before, so it was like, it is what it is, right? And most of the contracts back then were either 2 years with an option or 3 years with an option. There were no 11-year deals or 10-year deals or however long they can have it back.
Player option or team option? Or?
Both.
Okay.
So it's just so that if you couldn't get a deal done, you either weren't, you weren't going to be allowed to come to training camp without a contract, or you didn't want to go without a contract. So you had this option year to try and play out through the rest of the year and try to get a deal worked out. So I still had a year left on my contract in Chicago, but that wasn't. It had nothing to do with a contract. Continuing to play in Chicago. It was I had been there for, I think, 12 or 13 years. we had some great teams. I grew up playing with a great core group of players like Dougie Wilson and Bobby Murray and Darryl Sutter and Rich Preston and multiple guys. Dennis Savard, Al Secord, Jeremy Roenick. It was wonderful. Michel Goulet. I had great teammates and whatnot, but it was like we were stuck in neutral. Yeah. It's like we were never going to be really bad or we were never going to be really good. We were just always in the middle.
So you were telling us last time the only way to win a Stanley Cup was to get out of Chicago.
Well, after watching Dennis, I got traded to Montreal before that, and then they won the Stanley Cup in 1993, So it was like, maybe this is what you got to do. I don't know. But it worked out. But it was just one of those things where mentally you're stuck in neutral, right? It had nothing to do. I had great teammates, enjoyed the city. An unbelievable place to play from a fan perspective in the old Chicago Stadium. Incredible. But just from a hockey standpoint, I needed a reboot, I guess. Either to go play on a really bad team with a bunch of young kids and maybe try and help mentor them, or go and play on a team that had a legitimate chance at winning the Stanley Cup.
And so we know that worked out, so that was great. And we also, this was off camera, we were talking about this, but when Dennis Savard did actually get the Stanley Cup, that was an emotional moment for you?
Yeah, it was very emotional because of there's usually a pecking order with regards to, the captain goes and gets the Stanley Cup and has his moment with it or whatever, but then it's, and then you kind of pass it down, and there's that kind of an order to it, which is really cool. And Dennis was right at the very top of that list, and he was not dressed for that game, so he was in his suit and his street clothes and whatnot, and I think Guy Carbonneau gave him the cup, and to me it broke me. It was a pretty emotional moment for me to see how much respect those guys had for him, and having played with him for 10 years and knowing the kind of guy that he was and what a great teammate he was. It was, it still gives me chills to talk about it because it was pretty special.
He must have been a legend in Quebec at that time, right? And I'm assuming for some of the players on the team, he would have been their idol growing up.
Oh, for a lot of the young French-Canadian players, absolutely. It's just a wonderful player and a great player he's a Hall of Fame player, so what can you say? He did everything.
The Hall of Fame, does that bother you?
Not really. I think it's a place that's for special players, and I don't know that I'm really have the numbers to do it or played long enough, or I don't know. I don't really give it a whole lot of thought anymore.
I'll say this, maybe you do see it, but the support in the Peterborough community. Every now and then the conversation will come up. It's an annual thing when the Hall of Fame information comes out. There's something in Peterborough about why isn't Steve Larmer in the Hall of Fame, and people in this community firmly believe it. You do have the numbers. You've played more than 1,000 games. What percentage of players get there? The consecutive games, the Stanley Cups, everything, or the Stanley Cup and the Canada Cup. But when you hear people in the community supporting you like that, how much does that mean?
Well, it means everything. I mean, this is where I grew up and where I reside still to this day. So it's fabulous.
And you're in the Peterborough and District Sports Hall of Fame.
And the reality of it is that this is really important because this is where I grew up and where I got my start and the support that you get throughout, not just playing minor hockey and minor baseball or lacrosse, and from all your coaches and the kids that you play with and other parents. I mean, it's not something that you can do on your own. It's that old saying, it takes a village to raise an idiot, and I'm a prime example of that. So it's everybody, right? And it's a great spot. This place has always meant a lot to me, obviously, and it's where I've chosen to live, and I love it here.
No, I really admire your attitude towards the Hockey Hall of Fame. Was there ever a point where, like, I don't know if there's like playing politics, if there's an approach like that, if there's some pandering to be done, and I don't assume that you've ever taken part in any of that, but was there ever a moment that you considered maybe campaigning a little bit?
No. I mean, it is what it is. What's done is done. I think coming out of it when you're first eligible for it, you're a little bit maybe nervous or excited, and maybe there's a chance and stuff like that. But it's been so long now. It's like you can't go back and change anything. It is what it is. And if you're not good enough when you have that opportunity to first get in, then what's changed?
Hey, Mike Tyson fought on the weekend, so anything can happen.
Well, I'm not fighting.
When you watch guys get in, or women now, or everything, what's your reaction watching the annual ceremonies?
Oh, I love it. I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I think what's changed over the last maybe 10 to 15 years is that it's been more inclusive with regards to women getting in, players of different race
European
and religion,
players, right?
and whatnot. And it was nice. I was really happy Dougie Wilson was inducted, I guess, last year, but they're not going to have the ceremony until next year. I was really happy for him because I think he's he was a great player, a great teammate, and a great mentor for me. So, and he had great numbers and had a great long-lasting, a great career.
Yeah. Now, let's rewind a little bit to 91. This is before you're leaving Chicago, before the Stanley Cup, but a chance to experience winning at the highest level, the best tournaments. That moment, I can't, like, I'm sure most people can't fathom it, but when you're in a room and you look around and you see some of the names that are there, like just a fantasy team, like people make that in video games. To be a part of a team like that, what's it like? Honestly, I can't imagine it.
Well, it's quite an experience. I mean, it was, I think something that you always wanted to do because of the previous Canada Cups and that, and you've seen what the competition was like and the players that were involved in playing and all of that stuff. So it was always something that was on the back of your mind. Maybe one day I'll get a chance, and hopefully sooner rather than later. But and for me, it came later. I think I was 31 years old. So it was a great experience to walk into that dressing room, with Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier and Theo Young. We had some young players too because it was kind of a transition. Theo Fleury and Eric Lindros was a 19-year-old kid that played on that team. He had played in the Canada Cup before he had played in the NHL.
He's an Olympian as well, right? Before that, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was a fabulous experience. Billy Ramford and Eddie Belfour in goal. Scotty Stevens on defense. Just Al McGinnis. It was the best of the best, and it was great to be able to be around them and to learn, because you're always learning and picking up habits of them and whatnot. So it was exciting. It was, and the other thing too was I think we were the only team that went through that tournament undefeated. Even from the previous teams that were, and this seems to be the 91 Canada Cup seems to be the forgotten one.
When you listen to players, it's not shocking. But even at 31, you were learning.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're always learning about different things, and you're always watching these guys because these are the best players in the league. So you're watching what they do, what their routine is, how they prepare, what they're saying in the dressing room, what they're doing on the ice, and these are the things that that are uncoachable in a sense, right? So, you have your coach there to give you the guidance and the way they kind of want you to play, but you gotta you're picking up on these other things from the players too.
Leadership, I'd imagine, would have had to be different for the guys who are used to being captains or used to being associate captains when that whole group blends together. How did that form?
Well, you have a whole dressing room full of captains or assistants. So, I mean, obviously, when you got Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier on your team, those are your two go-to guys, and nobody's gonna kind of step on any of those toes because of their experience, and not only the multiple Stanley Cups they had won prior to that, but they had been involved in all of the Canada Cups prior to that too. So you take their lead and you follow and whatnot. So, and we had a whole dressing room full of guys. Dirk Graham was our captain in Chicago. Brent Sutter was an assistant. I was an assistant. Steve Smith was a defenseman. Scotty Stevens, Al McGinnis. All these guys were great. Daryl Hawerchuk. All leaders. You know, but when you walk in that dressing room, it's like, the saying always is you check your ego at the door and you're going to do what's asked of you.
Wearing the Canada jersey, did that humble everybody in a way and bring everything down?
Well, I don't know if it humbles you or if it just adds more pressure, especially having, when you're playing it here in Canada and you're expected to win. So it was just day by day, game by game, enjoy the experience, and that's really what it was, is from the start of training camp. And it was done differently than it had been done in the past, because in the past there was usually only, I think, maybe 30 to 35 players that were invited to these camps, because they pretty much had an idea of what they wanted to do. And this was a camp, it was held up in Collingwood, I think, for a week, and I think there were right in and around 60 players that were invited to this camp, because players were complaining that they never had an opportunity to try to participate in it or not. So that was the first year that they had done it like that.
And you came through. Had to feel a little bit extra special.
Well, it was. It was fun. But then, you go through all of that, and then after the fact, it's like, well, it was predetermined anyway, so it really didn't matter. So it's one of those, there's really no right way or wrong way. There's just many ways to do different things, and at the end of the day, you're never going to please anybody. So, we had, Stevie Yzerman never played on that team. Joe Sack, I don't know if Joe Sakic played on that team or not, but
Canada Team B would compete with the Canada Team A, I think, when it comes down to it anyways.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. There's just so much talent and skill back in those days that, you could have had two competitive teams that probably would have ended up in the finals playing each other.
Are there other international moments that match that or rival that feeling?
Well, I had one other opportunity. I had to play in the World Championships, I think, in 1990 or 90, before the Canada Cup, I think, and played over in Finland. So we were over in Finland for a good month participating in that, and I think we ended up winning the silver medal. But it was run differently back then. It wasn't like they were relegated or whatever. You played kind of like every team, and then it was like, this is how you ended up. So I think we came in second. I'm not sure if who ended up in first.
When would you have been? How far did you go in your regular season that year?
We got beat out in the first round of the playoffs.
Okay.
Which was the only time that I ever. And I think it was before the Canada Cup, so it might have been like, okay, well, let's send this guy over to Europe and see if he can play internationally, and because it's almost a prelude to trying out for the Canada Cup in a sense.
How quick did that phone call come?
The day after we lost out, and then it was like about 2 or 3 days later, on a plane and over there. So. It happened really fast, and it was for me, it was a great experience. You playing on that international rink, which I did not like and do not like.
You mentioned that skating wasn't your greatest asset last time we talked, but how did you adjust your game?
Well, it took me longer than I would have liked.
Okay.
I probably didn't feel comfortable until about 8 or 9 games into it, just because of, I mean, I played everywhere I ever played. Played in Peterborough, small rink with square corners. When I played 3 years of junior in Niagara Falls, which is even smaller than the rink here in Peterborough in the old Niagara Falls Garden. Go play in the Chicago Stadium, the smallest rink in the NHL. So everything was like, 2 steps out of the corner, you had a good shooting lane. So it was more of a, you learned to play more of a quick game than a fast game. So the international, game is way more passive. And playing on the big rink, you have to play more of a passive game. And playing in all these small rinks, we always played aggressive. So it was, pucks in behind the defenseman, get in, forecheck, win the battle, 2 steps out of the corner, you got a great, you got a great shot. It doesn't work like that over there. You're not 2 steps out of the corner, you might be 10, right? And there's no chasing, so you're not really playing a forecheck game because there's just too much room. So you're kind of, if you don't have the chance on the rush, you're kind of just, just sit back and clog up the neutral zone and try and pick off a pass and create a 2-on-1 or an odd man situation where you can score in the rush. But it's just a different game. And the mental part of it was hard to deal with because you're just used to, the button's on, it's like go, go, go. And now all of a sudden it's like, no, you can't do that. So every time you're coming back to the bench, it's like, no, we don't need you to go in and forecheck. The other 4 guys are laying back, and you're down there running around, wasting energy, looking like an idiot. Just pull back.
Well, it's station to station style versus. Well, you turn around, the boards are 10 feet away from you. You thought you were against the half wall.
Yeah, it's way different, right? And it's, and there's always been this debate about big. Players are getting bigger and faster, make the rink bigger. It doesn't matter how big you make the rink, at the end of the day, you still got to get to the front of the net to score a goal. So it's actually, if you can confine the area a little bit more, it actually makes for a more exciting game, I think, because then there's more bumping and grinding. There's not the big hits that you see today because of the speed, but it's quicker, it's shorter. There's 4 and 5 steps, and you're bumping and grinding.
Would you like to see the red line back in the game?
Yeah, I would. I've always advocated for that, and I will, wasn't really happy when they took it out because I've always thought that there was an intelligence with having to get through the neutral zone, and I think taking the red line out has kind of quashed that and leveled the playing field for a lot of players. I think a lot of the really good, talented players would have a lot more points if the red line was back in. And for me, it's a defensive thing in a sense, because when the red line was in, there was more pinching in the offensive zone, right?
Yeah.
So there was more opportunities.
There's nobody over your shoulder usually.
Yeah. So now it's like when you back off the offensive blue line, you don't back off to protect the center ice line and try to create that 2-line pass, right? So you just back right off. So now teams, they keep their defense together and they back off, and the goaltending's much better. So you can shoot the puck all day from the outside, right? But we're keeping tight in the middle so that we can't allow anybody to get in through there.
All that traded off for Erik Karlsson being able to launch a puck from behind his own net to the far blue line. I guess that's the one thing that came out of it. But
yeah, and how many times does that happen
once a year,
over the course of So I just think it would have. I just think for a lot of the high hockey IQ players, it would benefit them a lot more if the red line was back in, and the point totals would they're instead of 100-point seasons, you might see 140, 150 point years.
That'd be fun. That'd be fun for everybody.
Well, I think, you want to see offense, and I think, and when they did that change, it was with the intention of it creating offense. But did it, right?
Was there a competition committee like there is now when you were playing?
Yeah, when I worked at the NHLPA, we had meetings all about all of this and discussing different working groups with regards to it all, and and whatnot. But the consensus coming out of it was that it would be better if the red line was taken out and to open the game up a little bit more and whatnot. So, I mean, they go back the expansion when Florida came in, and the year Florida had that great run with Roger.
Yeah.
And that was the clutch and grab era, right? And that was a way of making those expansion teams more competitive than they probably should have been, was to level the playing field and let that creep back into the game, right? And so, they wanted to get away from that and start calling the penalties and the interference a little bit more and stuff like that, which kind of helped at the beginning. But at the end of the day, coaches adapt, they change things, so.
Constantly evolving game.
Well, it is really, and which is nice to see, because I think this year, even with the shortened year, in the playoffs, in the bubble or whatnot, that's probably the most physical hockey in the NHL we've probably seen in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with video games. Maybe not at all. Maybe a little bit. Maybe JR plays some.
I'm not allowed.
Not allowed to play?
No.
No. Well, if you're creating a player, there are ratings, and there's an awareness rating. Get a feeling that yours it's 0 to 99. Would you think that yours would be up above 90 in the way that you played the game, awareness? And you talk about playing with guys or playing against guys, like say Scott Stevens.
Yeah.
Brett Hall always famously says he knew who was on the ice.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he didn't want to die.
Yeah.
But when you were playing against guys like that, your awareness level, I'd assume, had to be really elevated. What's that like when you know there's a threat, there's a real threat on the ice when you're playing against guys like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, you knew every time you jumped over the boards, you paid attention on the bench. You're watching. Okay, who's out there, who's not? What's, Scotty Stevens. I mean, you gotta, okay, he's on the ice. All right. I need to keep my head up. I need to be aware where he is at all times, right? Because, I mean, he would be suspended more today.
Yes.
He would never played.
No.
I mean, he just hit that hard, and not that they were dirty or anything, but you're just not allowed to hit guys when they're in vulnerable positions anymore. And that was part of it, was you didn't put yourself in those positions back there. It's like, we have a penalty now, hitting from behind, headshots. Well, they've always, elbow to the head was 2-minute elbowing. They don't call elbowing anymore. They call it a headshot. But these rules are all, and they're made to protect players. I get that. But it also gives you a false sense of security that no matter what position you put yourself into, nobody can touch you, in a sense. So you're allowed to go through the middle of the ice reaching for a pass with your head down in a vulnerable position, which you shouldn't do, right? But a lot of it is, there's no body contact in minor hockey anymore until you get to, I think, bantam now. And so all of those skills that you can learn to protect yourself from, mite, tight, novice, all the way up until then, you're not really learning. And survival skills, I guess you'd call them.
How much does operating in a contact environment impact your ability to move the puck, to get to the right spot, knowing that you have to pass it quickly? Is that something that keeping your head on a swivel, I guess, is what I'm getting to here? How much did learning that at a young age help you?
Oh, big time. I mean, you're constantly, and the one thing that's always, my coaches always reminded me of was keep moving your feet, move your feet. So it's a give and go. It's not a give and watch. So when you move the puck, get going. You want to get it back, but you got to get yourself into that position where you can get it back. So, and you got to move it before you get tied up, right? And if you do that and you're impeded in getting into your way, chances are you're either going to draw a penalty or you're going to put yourself in a chance for a good scoring chance.
Now, stay on awareness and knowing who's out there, and tensions boil over in the NHL a lot more when you played than they do now. Did you get into a lot of altercations on the ice?
Well, yeah.
Yeah?
But, it just was, there was a different level of accountability where the players held themselves accountable. So, if you had a guy on your team that was out there running around you know, going after the other team's better players, you know, cheap shots or whatever it might be, late hits, hits from behind. You know, either the other team would address it and put a guy out there to hammer him, or they started coming after your better players and whatnot. So a lot of that stuff, it would come to a boil, something would happen, and then it was over and done with.
Do you remember the first time you learned a lesson?
I learned a few lessons the hard way. I got into a fight with Al McAdam one night when he played for Minnesota. And I don't know what happened. Something happens on the ice, and back then it was, you know, 5 guys, everybody grabbed each other and you partnered up. And, you know, sometimes you went or you just held on to each other until it got, and I don't know, we ended up having a fight or whatever, and it wasn't much of a fight. I think he hit me twice and then it was over. And I was just hanging on for dear life. And that was back in the day when, you know, most of our games were back to back. So, you know, we would play in Minnesota on a Saturday night. Well, Minnesota would come and we'd play in Chicago on a Sunday night. So we had 6 periods against these guys. So the tensions, you know, we're running pretty hot for 6 periods. So you go and you start the next game and, you know, stuff happens again. And here it is. And I end up with Al McAdam again. And we're kind of grabbing each other, and he looks at me and he says, "Are you that stupid?" And I said, "No, Mr. McAdam, I'm not." But that's the way it was back then, right?
Yeah.
Where there were, when things happened, it happened. And it happened, it was over, it was done with.
So there's that when you're younger, and then you talk about maybe guys on your own bench saying, "Hey, listen, I don't want to have a long night tonight, maybe settle down a little bit." When you were in a leadership position, was that something you were taking part in?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember one night we're playing in Detroit, and we had a young player on our team, Jocelyn Lemieux, Claude Lemieux's brother, his younger brother. Great player, come from, I think we got him from St. Louis or something. Big kid, strong. And I don't know, he was playing with myself, I think, and Jeremy Roenick or whatever. And I can remember before we were going out on the ice for the game or whatever, I said, "Listen, if we're playing against Proby tonight, or if he's lined up with us or whatever, you're going to be lined up against him. Just let him sleep. Like, let's not do anything to wake him up, right?" And, oh, God, first or second shift in, does he not run him, flatten him, right? I'm like, oh, my God, this is going to be a long night. Now Proby's, you got him. He's engaged in the game now, right? And it's going to be a long night for all of us. So, and I don't know if they ended up fighting later in the game or not, but it just changes the dynamics of a game when you engage them like that.
His name obviously is a famous one. Like, when he's on your side, how does that impact? Well, I assume it makes you feel like 6 inches taller. But when you have Bob Probert on your side,
yeah. Well, I never had him on my side.
Oh, really? No, you weren't in Chicago at the same time.
No, we never played in Chicago at the same time, because when I left, he came in a year or two later. But no, I had Al Secord on my side.
Sure, yeah.
And some big players in Chicago and whatnot. So, yeah, you know, out there on the ice with Al, you felt a lot protected. And, you know, I did. I felt like I was 6 inches taller. And you're able, you know, but it just opens up more space for you, right? So, and as long as you're there to protect his back, like if he does get into it with somebody, you know, part of the problem back then was that you didn't want anybody, a third man jumping in.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why you kind of pair it up, and to make sure that stuff never happened.
What a thing to worry about.
Well, there was a lot to worry about back then. Yeah, there were some tough teams back then. I mean, the Philadelphia Flyers in the early '80s. That was a tough building to go in and play in the old Spectrum and whatnot, because they still had that, you know, Broad Street bully thing going on, and they always played a physical, hard-hitting game.
Now, teammates that you overlapped with, your brother.
Yeah.
You guys played in the NHL for a few games together?
We played for half a year together when he got traded from New Jersey to Chicago, and that was back in there, I think 82 or 83, when Orville Tessier was still coaching, because he had coached Jeff and Kitchener for a couple of years in the OHL. So he knew him and he brought him in, and yeah, we got to play together for half a year, which was a blast.
Again, there's another experience that just has to be truly special. Being able to look across the dressing room. I don't know where he was sitting in the room with you,
Yeah.
but just to lock eyes with your brother at intermission.
Oh, I had to drive him to the rink and babysit him all the time. that was the most of it.
Yeah.
No, it was a great experience to be able to share that with him. I mean, and you know, he was a better player than I was, but it just didn't get the chance to play with the right people at the right time, right?
Yeah.
And that's really had a lot to do with my success, was being able to, you know, being put in the right position by coaches that allowed you to play the way you were capable of playing.
Now, did you guys ever play on a line together in that half season?
I think we were on the ice a couple of times
Yeah.
together for shifts and stuff like that, but not on a regular basis.
Yeah. Was it? No, it's probably you're stuck in a system, you're stuck in a style. But do you have flashbacks to the ponds of Peterborough?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. When they used to run the rinks over at Keith Whiteman's school, they used to have 2 rinks over there, and we used to play over there all the time for days on end, like hours and hours and hours. So, and that's where we really learned how to play in that kind of uncontrolled environment, where you learned how to play keep away, and you know, you had 8-year-olds playing against 16-year-olds. It wasn't 5-on-5. It could have been 10-on-10 or 8-on-8 or whoever showed up played, right? And of all skills. So it was a great way to grow up playing.
Now, we asked you last time what you believe your legacy is in sports in Peterborough. Now, what do you have left? Do you have any more aspirations? Is there anything more you want to do with the game of hockey, or are you just happy to look back on it and enjoy it?
Yeah, just, you know, remember what a great experience, you know, not just playing the game, but it's the people you meet. You can measure your life in many different ways, but you know, it's the people and the friendships that you make over the course of the years, and I've been blessed to have many good friends and enjoyed some fabulous experiences.
I'll tack one more thing onto there. If you're watching a game, any team on any given night, is there one team that you feel like you need to watch still?
Well, I still enjoy watching Chicago.
Okay.
I love watching, you know, I think Patrick Kane's a real...
He's fun, yeah.
Yeah, he's a fun, well, no, but they're fun guys to watch, right? Because
Yeah.
they're out there trying different things, and, you know, it doesn't work all the time, but it seems to have worked really well for him. So, you know, and Jonathan Taves and Duncan Keith, and I like watching those guys. I like watching Sidney Crosby. I think he's still you know, the king of the kings. But, you know, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl out in Edmonton are exciting players to watch, along with, you know, Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews in Toronto. So, you know, there's some good young players that have great skill that are fun to watch. But with that chip and chase game, you know, that long stretch pass, and, you know, I'll watch a period, and if I see too many of those, that's not really what I want. No, but
A lot of people get there.
yeah, and I understand it and whatnot. But there's some great young talent in the league right now that's it's fun to watch.
Would you say Steve Larmer is a fan of blank? Is there a team?
Oh, the Blackhawks.
The Blackhawks? Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
And then growing up, it wasn't the Blackhawks?
No, growing up it was Bobby Orr and the Big Bad Bruins.
Okay. Well, hey, you keep it in the original 6, I guess, when it's 2 nice-looking jerseys.
Well,
Give me that as well.
yeah, all of them were.
Yes.
All of them were.
All right, well, Steve, thanks again for your time. Really enjoyed this one as well as the last one. And hey, I hope you enjoy being able to watch hockey and watch the Blackhawks and watch Patrick Kane. It's all fun. I hope we get a season this year.
Yes, me too. And thank you so much for having me, Dan.